Friends, I welcome you all on behalf of the Bar Association of Maharera and Maharera Appellate Tribunal, along with Pune Rera Practitioner Association. Our today's speaker is a well-known personality, Senior Advocate Vinay Navre sir. Sir is an designated senior advocate in Honorable Supreme Court. Sir is a famous personality and needs no introduction, but as a part of the formal process, I hand over to Advocate Anil D'Souza to introduce Sir. Anil, over to you.
Thank you, Chetan. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. In fact, it is an honor and a privilege to welcome our very respected senior advocate and counsel of the Supreme Court of India, Shri Vinay Navre ji. Welcome, sir. Welcome to our webinar. And sir has a very interesting and rich background. And by sir's permission, I will elaborate on a very few points sir has told me to mention. Sir started practicing on the appellate side of the Bombay High Court in 1988. Simultaneously, sir completed his LLM in Constitutional Law and Property Law from the Mumbai University in 1990. Sir took a break from his practice and pursued Masters in International Law from the Groningen University, the Netherlands, that is, between 2002 to 2003. Sir moved to Delhi to practice in the Supreme Court in 2004. And in March 2019, Sir was designated as a senior advocate by the Supreme Court of India. Sir has more than 150 reported cases of the Honorable Supreme Court, not counting the cases of the Delhi High Court and Bombay High Court. Sir was also in the chambers of the ex-MP Shri Bal Apte. Sir represents the Thane Municipal Corporation along with also the Navi Mumbai, Kolhapur and the Mira Bhayandar Municipal Corporations. Sir has been a lawyer for many builders and Sir Navratko as well. On behalf of the Bar Association of Maharera and Maharera Appellate Tribunal and also the Rera Practitioners Association, I welcome Sir to our webinar on Article 370, the Constitution of India. And with these few words, I welcome Sir on board and request him to take the dais. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harshad, Chetan, and Advocate Anil. I must first of all thank and in fact congratulate all the viewers of this webinar for their enthusiasm in participating in an activity which is going to keep them updated as also very relevant in the profession. I also congratulate the three associations which are in collaboration organizing such webinars for last couple of months during the period of lockdown when the courts have virtually come to standstill. It's a good activity and I must congratulate all the office bearers including Harshad and all of you. When Harshad requested me about a week before and left the choice of subject to me, I thought that I will choose a topic which has been a very debated topic, but unfortunately which has gone in the sidelines as a result of the emerging situation in the last about 3-4 months. We are all bogged down by so many issues now that we are living in, which include the COVID-19, which include whether the patient is positive, what are the symptoms, lockdown, relaxation, what are the effects on our activities, etc., etc. But even during these kinds of phases of life, there are some issues which are, according to me, of eminent importance for the social life, for national life, and Article 370 has been one of such subjects. And I thought that, and as you all know that sometime from July 2019 till December, when the CAA bill was introduced, the topic most substantially occupied in the media, the printed media as also the electronic media, was Article 370 and the steps taken by the Union Government of India with respect to Article 370. I thought that this issue is going to surface again sometime, maybe after the courts resume back its normal work, and therefore my choice for the subject was Article 370. But before I tell you anything about what the government has done with respect to Article 370, I must introduce with one very significant statement. What the government of India or the Parliament has done with respect to Article 370 is extremely innovative and intelligent way of remodeling Article 370. In fact, I had an hesitation in my mind, or some doubts in my mind, because some people have used the word abolition of Article 70. Some people have used the word repeal of Article 370. About a few weeks before, I had heard the interview of Harish Salve, renowned senior counsel in the Supreme Court. He had used decommissioning of Article 370. After examining and understanding the scheme and what is exactly done by the Supreme Court of India, I am using the word neutralizing of Article 370. Article 370 as it existed has been neutralized by what is done by the government, and which is very extremely innovative and extremely intelligent way of remodeling it. Having said this, let me go to the history of Article 370, and it will not be only history of Article 370. It will be actually the history of manner in which the Indian independence ushered in, and the emerging situation which arose because of we all, perhaps numbers we may not be knowing, but in India had about over 550 princely states which were governed by the small rulers. With respect to Maharashtra, for example, since most of the viewers will be from Maharashtra, Kolhapur Shahu Maharaj Sansthan was one of such princely state. Or Hyderabad, Jammu and Kashmir, Gwalior, these were all princely states. And the exact legal relationship that these princely states and the British government or the British India had has to be understood for that purpose. What the British government had done was that they had retained with them 3 or 4 very significant fundamental subjects of the governance. They included, for example, defense. It included foreign relations, international treaties, etc. So all these fundamental issues of governance or subjects of governance were retained by the British government with it. But for this, all other matters of administration were left to the autonomy of the princely state. As a result of that, these princely states were never regarded as sovereign states. Sovereign states, we know that it's a self-made authority. Nobody can create it, nobody can destruct it. It emerges and it survives of its own existence. So these princely states were not sovereign states, and the term in constitutional law which is used for that is suzerain states. So they were all suzerain states, suzerain princely states till 15th of August 1947. When the British government and the freedom movement, the Congress, led by Congress, it was agreed that India will actually be independent country on from 15th of August 1947. An Independence of India Act was passed in 1947. The passing of 1947 Indian Independence Act had some consequences, and I think this was a trick played by the British to create as many obstacles, as many difficulties for the Indian government or Indian people to administer this huge, vast country. What it did was, as a result of Independence of India Act 1947, all the princely states became sovereign states. Those limited subjects which were controlled or which were retained by the British government fell back to the princely states, and as a consequence of that, legally speaking, theoretically speaking, these princely states became sovereign states. And we all know that it was the biggest challenge ever faced by our country, our leadership then, of having a united India as one nation. And Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, we all know, played a very major role in in persuading, in pressurizing, in some way getting all the princely states on the board for joining the Indian state. As far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, there was some kind of tussle going on, but I must also refer to some background that Jammu and Kashmir had. At the relevant point of time, Jammu and Kashmir was under the rulership of Maharaja Hari Singh, and Maharaja Hari Singh perhaps had a dream, since it was not in the midst of the Indian territories, and it was on the extreme end of the Indian territory. He had perhaps a dream of having his own sovereign state, and therefore there was some kind of dithering on the part of Maharaja Hari Singh in acceding to the Indian nation. It is at that point of time that I can give the date, 22nd of October 1947, that the tribal raiders had invaded Jammu and Kashmir. And we all know that it was actually sponsored by the Pakistani Army, which was Pakistan, which was newly created just a couple of months before. The grave created by that invasion of the tribal raiders was so grave that Maharaja Hari Singh realized that he has to now take help of the Indian government. And it is in these circumstances, on 22nd of October, the invasion starts. On 25th of October 1947, Maharaja Hari Singh executes the agreement of accession with the government of India. It is this way that Jammu and Kashmir started its accession to India. However, Maharaja Hari Singh even at that time perhaps had the idea that once this difficult phase is over, continuity of his sovereign state, status, etc. will continue. And therefore, there was some negotiation going on which led to some kind of arrangement which resulted into Article 370. That was a time 1947 to 1950. We all know that Constituent Assembly for framing of the Constitution was already underway. And it is at that point of time that discussions, deliberations, debates were going on between the two rival parties or two sides. I will not say two rival parties, two sides. What way the relationship of the Jammu and Kashmir within the setup of Indian nation will be. It is this background which led to Article 370 created. But I must tell you Article 370. Article 370 itself, we call it the marginal note, but in common parlance, we understand it as head note of the section. It says it's a temporary provision. So the fact that Article 370 is a temporary provision is clearly highlighted by the marginal note itself, temporary provision. There is one clause in Article 370, clause 3 of Article 370, which authorizes the President of India by presidential order direct that Article 370 will cease to operate. That is, it will not anymore work. It will not anymore be operative. That's the power conferred in Article 370 itself. But there is a proviso to that, and that proviso is provided that such presidential order is issued on the recommendation of the Constituent Assembly of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And it is here that the problem actually arose. There is one important way in which the situation progressed thereafter. As a part of the arrangement which was agreed at that time, it was also decided that the Jammu and Kashmir will have its own constitution, and that for that, Constituent Assembly for the state of Jammu and Kashmir came to be formed. That was sometime in 1952. But Constitution of India had already started working from 26th of January 1950. And as a result of that, the deliberations and that fluid situation continued. Ultimately, in 1956, Jammu and Kashmir Constitution came into existence and Constituent Assembly came to be dissolved in 1957. This is one background. But Article 370 says that the Indian Constitution will not apply to the state of Jammu and Kashmir as it is, and by the President of India, by issuing an order, either with the concurrence of the state or at the with the on the recommendation of the state government to apply such provisions of the Indian Constitution with such modifications, with such changes as may be deemed appropriate. And it is this clause of Article 371 and 2 which enabled the government of India to apply diverse provisions of the Indian Constitution with some modifications to the Jammu and Kashmir. The situation continued as it is. There is one important presidential order under Article 371 which came to be issued in 1954, by which almost most of the provisions of the Indian Constitution were applied to the state of Jammu and Kashmir with certain modifications, and some of the modifications were extremely significant, extremely serious. But that presidential order of 1954 also introduced one additional provision applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and that is the problematic provision which was introduced. That was Article 35A. By Article 35A, the state of Jammu and Kashmir was allowed to create its own law prescribing what will be the test or what will be the criteria for the permanent residentship of Jammu and Kashmir, and it will be within the powers of the state to confer upon such permanent residents the several rights and privileges. Those privileges include, for example, only permanent residents can purchase the immovable property. Employment in Jammu and Kashmir will be available only for the permanent residents of the Jammu and Kashmir. These were, for example, scholarship or the aid from the government will be available only for the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir. And it is this provision which was the, really speaking, starting of the problematic relations as a result of Article 370. Now, this is one background. Apart from 1954, there were several presidential orders issued from 1950 onwards till as recently as 2017. So the application of diverse provisions of the Constitution with some modifications was a process which has gone on for all these years from 1950 onwards. I made a reference in the earlier part of my speech to the other princely states. I told that there are more than 550 princely states, and those princely states also were rendered sovereign states as a result of the Independence of India Act 1947. The only situation which differed was most of those states were within the territory of India, and therefore it was just necessary that they become part of the Indian territory. But there was one more philosophical and political reason for which such accession of all these states to the Indian territory was necessary. We cannot miss the fact that the freedom struggle was not really by the princely states or the princely rulers. Freedom struggle was actually because of the common man, whether in the other parts of India or in those 550 odd princely states. And therefore, freedom movement was a movement of the people, and it will be extremely unfair, extremely unreasonable if, as a result of the efforts of the common man, even in those 550 odd princely states, independence is derived by those or sovereignty is derived by those princely states, and they become independent at the cost of the efforts and toil and all those sacrifices by the common man within those princely states. But there were diverse kinds of pressures, pushes coming in. As a result of that, the leadership of India, and I must name Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel also, agreed to one thing, that all these princely rulers will be entitled to certain sizable amounts annually payable to them by the government of India. That was called as privy purse. So every year the government of India will be bound to pay the rulers of those erstwhile princely states certain amounts, and those amounts ranged from few thousand to few lakhs. from the Consolidated Fund of India. And for that, there was a formal agreement. There were formal agreements reached between those princely states on one hand, individually, and the government of India. But that was not only based on agreement. The way Article 370 is specially engrafted in the Constitution for dealing with the interstate relationship between the India as a whole and the state of Jammu and Kashmir. There were two provisions, 291 and 362, Article 291 and 362, which dealt with provision for the privy purses payable to these princely rulers. Now, as far as these were the parallel developments going on, 370 on one hand, princely and privy purse on the other hand. Sometime in 1970, when Indira Gandhi was the prime minister, and salute to Indira Gandhi for her vision at that time, Indira Gandhi decided to abolish those privy purses. And that abolition of privy purses was a rude shock to those rulers, erstwhile rulers, that what was agreed upon, a solemn undertaking given by the leadership of the Congress and the Indian nation and incorporated in the Constitution of India, is now being breached as a result of this amendment. The statement of objects of that particular amending act of 1971, 26th amendment, was that the egalitarian society, which is the object of the Indian Republic, and the payment of privy purses to the erstwhile rulers are incompatible with each other, and therefore abolition is necessary. And what is most significant for the purposes of our topic is that the abolition of privy purses by 26th amendment came to be challenged before the Supreme Court, and ultimately the Supreme Court upheld the abolition of privy purses. So what was promised by India to the erstwhile rulers, to the erstwhile states, was not sacrosanct, and it was something that was not coming in the way of the will of the people through the amendment of the Constitution. And that is how the development with respect to privy purses took place. Now, I have made a reference to this because 370 also has a similar background. There were certain promises, agreement of accession entered into between Maharaja Hari Singh and the government of India in 1947. And what about those promises? These are the issues. I think these kinds of arguments stand answered by the judgment of 5 judges of the Supreme Court in privy purses case of 1994. That is the judgment of 1994 of 5 judges. This is the background. Now, there is one thing I must point out, and what has happened as a result of the Article 370 on ground. See, there are 4 sections of the people within the state of Jammu and Kashmir who are deprived of significant rights and status of permanent residents. I will give examples of all those 4 classes. One is, there were people who migrated from West Pakistan to Jammu and Kashmir and settled down there, and most of them, they are Muslims. They were not granted the status of permanent residence. As a result, they can't buy immovable property. They can't get the jobs in the government or public employment. They can vote for parliament elections, but they can't vote for the assembly elections or for the elections to the Panchayat Raj also, Panchayatis also. One section. Second section was, in 1956, there was huge strike of sweepers in Jammu and Kashmir. And the situation was so grave that Sheikh Abdullah, who was the chief minister at that time, decided to request the sweepers community from Punjab to shift over to Jammu and Kashmir. And he made a promise to them that we will settle you here by offering lands, and you will be treated as permanent residents. 270 families, sweepers families, that is backward class community, shifted from Punjab to Jammu and Kashmir on the promise given by the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. Till date, they are not given the ownership of the land. Even they are given the lands where they have their houses, but even pattas or official documents of ownership are not given to them. Public employment promise is fulfilled. Let me tell you how. They introduced an amendment that only two kinds of jobs will be available to these sweeper community, which settled at the request of the Chief Minister. One is the job of sweeper, and second is job of chowkidar, class 4 employees. So even if some new generation of sweeper community undertakes education, gets educated, entitlement to public employment was restricted to these two. Third is, since the time of Maharaja Hari Singh, Gorkha community used to be invited to join its army and in several other employments under the king. And they were substantial in number. They, as a result of coming over there for jobs, they actually settled down. They are not treated as permanent residents. All consequences of not being treated as permanent residents, similar as I have already narrated. And the last is, even a woman in a family of permanent resident, if she gets married to a non-permanent resident, she is not entitled to succeed to the immovable property. Of course, I must also make a reference that 2016 there was a judgment, Sushila judgment of Jammu and Kashmir High Court, holding that no, she will be entitled to a share in the immovable property. But after her demise, property cannot go to her husband or to her legal heirs, to her children. It goes back to her erstwhile family. So that right to get share in the family property, immovable property, is again a theoretical. These are the issues which did arise in all these years, which deprived the sizable section of the residents in the Jammu and Kashmir from the basic rights such as right to buy property, right to vote, right to public employment, etc. And these are the rights which are part of the fundamental guarantees available to the citizens of India. But if you are non-permanent resident in Jammu, residing there for 50 years, 60 years, you cannot challenge that. Denial of fundamental rights. But there is one situation which gave rise to the decision of the government of India in 2019, and that situation is what we saw after 1989. We all know that the presence of terrorist organizations in Jammu and Kashmir increased tremendously. Apart from the terrorist organizations, the influence of the terrorists was so rampant that one community had to say goodbye to their own motherland. Kashmiri Pandits, we all know. Kashmiri Pandits with their families in thousands had to flee from Jammu and Kashmir as a result of that. There are some figures which I want to tell, and for that I will make a reference to a paper in front of me. See, as you know that neutralization of Article 370 has taken place in August 2019, which has been challenged by several parties, several petitioners through various writ petitions before the Supreme Court which are pending. Government of India has filed an affidavit in reply to that. The information which is given by the Government of India is significant to note. I am telling you about what are the differences which have occurred after post 1990. The affidavit says that between 1990 and 2019, that is in those about 29 years, 41,861 people died. They have lost their lives. Out of 41,861, 5,291 are civilians. 14,035 are civilians. 5,291 are security force personnel, and 22,535 are terrorists. You can imagine what kind of infiltration the terrorists had made for all these years in Jammu and Kashmir. And the kind of amount which is spent by the Government of India on the people of Jammu and Kashmir as compared to the people in the rest of India is also alarming. I will give just one example of 2011-2012. While amount of rupees 3683 per person was spent in rest of India by the Government of India, amount of rupees 14,255 was spent for per person in Jammu and Kashmir. You can see the difference. See, huge amount was being pumped in. Where did that money go? It did not reach the common man, that is certain. And even if it reached, you can see the disproportionateness in the spending on the per person in Jammu and Kashmir and spending per person in the rest of India. It is this kind of alarming situation which led to the decision of the government of India and the Indian Parliament to neutralize Article 370. We all know that there was a demand for abolition of Article 370 for several years, but it did not get the popular support for all these years. But the kind of change that underwent in Jammu and Kashmir after 1990, I think was eye-opener for the other people who were not supporting the abolition of Article 370 for all those years. Now, before I again come to what is the intelligent and what is the very innovative way in which the government has brought in that neutralization of Article 370, I must make reference to the 3 judgments of the Supreme Court. I don't want to be too technical because I know that some of the advocates who are viewers here may not be the regular, or may be practicing in a particular branch of law, consumer courts, or maybe RERA, etc., etc. Or there may be some persons who may not be lawyers but who are participating in this. So I don't want to be too technical about it. This is what I. So I want to make reference to those 3 judgments. First judgment is of Puran Lal. In that, although the order of detention was challenged by this Puran Lal, what is observed by the Supreme Court is important. Supreme Court has said that power to modify the Indian Constitution as applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir is of wide amplitude. That power to modify includes power to limit, power to restrict, power to enlarge, power to add, power to amend, everything. So 371 power to modify is a very wide power. That's the judgment of the Supreme Court. We are understanding what is done by the government of India and Parliament in 2019 in the light of law which is laid down by the Supreme Court way back in 1962. Second judgment is Muhammad Maqbool Damnu. In that again, the challenge was to some action of the government. We are not really concerned with that action. But what is observed is that even if there is the term used of Sadar-e-Riyasat in Article 370 has become redundant because Sadar-e-Riyasat was abolished and the post of governor was created. So governor was the successor of Sadar-e-Riyasat, and therefore the challenge was that Article 370 explanation says Sadar-e-Riyasat and Sadar-e-Riyasat doesn't exist, and therefore the order issued by the governor is without any authority. Supreme Court said that you have to understand the provisions in the light of the change in the situation, and interpretation of statutes can be with the help of certain principles of law. One of the principles says if there is successor to that office, that successor to that office is equally competent to do what the original provision provides for. Third judgment of 2017 is extremely significant, and I must point out that people who oppose the neutralization of Article 370 rely upon this judgment, but wrongly according to me. It is a judgment delivered by Justice Rohinton Nariman. The issue again was not so relevant. There is a Securitization Act by which the banks are given extraordinary powers of auctioning the property without going to the court. And whether that Securitization Act, which is applicable all over India, is applicable in state of Jammu and Kashmir was the issue. But the important thing is that High Court of Jammu and Kashmir had made an observation that state of Jammu and Kashmir is a sovereign state. And it is in this background that there are certain observations made by Justice Nariman in that 2017 judgments. I will just tell you 4 important findings, I will say, not observations. One, that there is no dual citizenship in India. In some federal constitutions, there are dual citizenship of the state and citizenship of the central entity also. For example, state of Michigan, citizenship, as also the state of United States. See, that's something that is permissible in some constitution. Nariman says that there is only one single citizenship, and state of the permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir do not have independent citizenship. They are Indian citizens as much as others. Second, extremely important, Jammu and Kashmir is not a sovereign state. There is only one sovereignty recognized under the Indian Constitution, and that is the sovereignty of India. Extremely important observation. Third, that the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir is subordinate to the Indian Constitution. What is supreme is the Constitution of India, and the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir is only subordinate to it. These are, and there is, I think, 4th observation which is also relevant, which I must not miss, and that the Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. See, this is a specific, unequivocal observation recorded by the Supreme Court, Justice Nariman, in 2007. These 4 observations, according to me, are extremely significant. This is the background of the steps which are taken by the Government of India and the Indian Parliament with respect to Article 370. I must now invite your attention to the language used in Article 370, especially Clause 3 and the proviso to Clause 3. I have that document with me, and I will just show that document. Just bear with me for a while. Where is it? Yes, this is Article 370. And let us not bother about Clause 1, 2, etc. Let us concentrate on Clause 3 and the proviso. I will just read Article 370, Clause 3. Notwithstanding anything in the provisions contained, just a minute, because yes. Notwithstanding anything in the foregoing provisions of this article, the President may, by public notification, declare that this article shall cease to be operative. Please mark this. President by notification can direct that Article 370 shall cease to be operative and or shall be operative only with such exceptions and modifications and from such date as he may specify. So there is a power in the President of India to issue an order that this Article 370 will cease to be operative. For all these 70 years, this power exists. Nobody bothered to invoke that, for whatever political reasons. Proviso is something that creates an obstacle in exercise of this power, provided that the recommendation of the Constituent Assembly of the state referred to in Clause 2 shall be necessary before the President issues such notification. As I told you, Constituent Assembly of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which was created in 1952, came to be dissolved after the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir was adopted in 1957. There are 2 conflicting arguments which are arising out of that. One argument is that now that Constituent Assembly doesn't exist, proviso itself doesn't exist, the power to issue order for seizing of the 370 continues. This is the argument which supports the government. Other argument is that proviso is mandatory and it's on the recommendation of. It's not just consent being given by the Constituent Assembly. On the recommend, so such proposal has to originate from the Constituent Assembly. If there is no Constituent Assembly, there cannot be origination of the proposal for cancellation of 370, and therefore 373 power to issue such direction not available. The Government of India and the Indian Parliament chose a very interesting route for that, and this is where I said that it's a very intelligent way of the achieving the purpose. In first part of Article 370, Article 371, there is a power, as I have already made a reference to that couple of times, that the President can make applicable as many provisions or such provisions of the Indian Constitution to the Jammu and Kashmir with such modifications as may be deemed appropriate. Now here is where the government has played an interesting move, or the Parliament has, I will say it's not interesting move, I will use the word, a very interesting instrument available to it under the Constitution. Where is it? There is some problem. See, what is, Gwen, can you come and see? See, Article 367 provides for the, I have that and I will be able to show that to you in a while. You come here, don't worry. Yes, there is a provision for, just a minute. Yes, this is the order which is issued by the government with respect to Article 367. And I will not read the entire part, but I will just show Clause D of this. This is the introduction of additional provision in Article 367 as applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir. I will read this Clause D. In proviso to Clause 3, which we just now read, of Article 370 of this Constitution, the expression Constituent Assembly of the state referred to in Clause 2 shall be read Legislative Assembly of the state. So when the reference is made to Constituent Assembly, it can also be understood to mean Legislative Assembly. So a new kind of situation now emerges, that what can be done under 373 proviso by the Constituent Assembly can also be done by the Legislative Assembly. But there is a problem. We all know that the assembly was dissolved because President's rule was imposed in Jammu and Kashmir since 2018. But for that, Article 356 is important. Under Article 356, when the presidential rule is imposed in any state, including state of Jammu and Kashmir, all powers which the assembly can exercise can be exercised by the parliament on its behalf. So, what can be done under proviso to Clause 3 of Article 370 stands modified because of this Clause D introduced by amendment under 371 in Article 367, and because there was President's rule, what could have been done by the Assembly of the Jammu and Kashmir can now be done by the Parliament on its behalf. Perfectly complete solution to the problem. See, there is one thing which is done, which is, see, in the beginning I said, that the word used by media or many people is Article 370 is abolished. It is not abolished. After this exercise is done, see, there are 3 exercises done by the Parliament on 5th of August, 6th of August, and I think 8th or 9th of August. One is introduction of amendment as applicable to state of Jammu and Kashmir to 367, which I am showing to you on the screen. Secondly, issuance of notification after this by the President under Section 373, and thereafter 370 itself is modified. By that power 370, now the amended 370 says, and it's only one clause, it's not as huge as the earlier screen we have seen. Amended 370 says that all provisions of the constitution shall be applicable to Jammu and Kashmir on par with all other states. That's how the exercise of neutralizing the earlier 370 is complete. But that was not all. There is one more step on which I'm not going to speak because that's not the topic, but I'm just making a reference to that. After this was done, the parliament did one more thing. The statehood of Jammu and Kashmir was abolished. State of the Ladakh was given independent status as union territory, and Jammu and Kashmir now become independent union territory. See, this situation was resorted to in extremely compulsive situation, which I have already narrated. The kind of denial to the fundamental rights to one significant segment of the population in the Jammu and Kashmir state. And second, the situation which was created post 1990 was alarming, and that is something that is sought to be averted by this legislative means by the parliament. Before I conclude, I must make reference to one thing. I already told you that privy purses was abolished in 1970, and Supreme Court 5 judges have confirmed that or upheld that amendment. In that, Supreme Court has said that such amendment was necessary because the preamble to the Constitution provides for, I will just read the relevant part of the preamble. I don't have that on the screen, but that's not necessary because it's very small. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all, please mark this, and to secure to all its citizens. There are three clauses: justice, I'm not concerned now with that; liberty, not concerned with that; equality, not concerned with that for the present. The last is fraternity. I will read that clause relating to fraternity in entirety. So, to secure to all its citizens fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual, denial of fundamental rights to segment of a huge segment of population in Jammu and Kashmir, that was something not permissible. Fraternity is our ideal. Fraternity, assuring dignity of individual. That dignity now stands restored because of the steps taken by the government. But what follows thereafter is important. Fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual, and unity and integrity of the nation. So people of India, we the people of India, assured to ourselves of unity and integrity of India. It is this unity and integrity which was in serious danger because of the situation that country saw between 1990 and 2019, which forced such drastic steps being taken by the Parliament of India. This is how the 370 article, its neutralization has taken effect. Whatever I had to say, I have completed. If there are any questions, the questions are welcome. I must tell, before I conclude, one thing, that now those steps taken by the government of neutralizing Article 370 and abolition of statehood of the Jammu and Kashmir are the matters pending in the Supreme Court. They will be decided sometime by Constitution Bench. Today, the situation is Jammu and Kashmir is governed by Indian Constitution, lock, stock and barrel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was really very enlightening. I would request Harshad sir to speak a few words.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, thank you very much for accepting the invitation on behalf of our bar and coming
Harshad.
here. And hello, sir.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sir, we again thank you very much for accepting our invitation and giving such a wonderful lecture and enlightening us. There are questions which are flooding in even the chat box. So I will request first Anil to take the questions from the participants which they want to put to sir, and proceed with this, please, Anil.
Yes, Harshad sir, thank you very much. To moderate the questions, I would request Advocate Vishwajit Mukherjee to come online, please. Thank you.
I will read first question by the time Vishwajit fixes his
Yes,
mic.
please, please.
There's a question from Simran John.
Okay.
Now the question reads this: the government says when Article 370 existed, if Kashmiri women married residents of India, they couldn't inherit property. However, Kashmir's High Court in 2016 in Sushila's case had stated that it's an outsider male who marries a Kashmiri girl who was at a disadvantage. If we look at the 1920 law, the Kashmiri woman always had the right to inherit regardless of whether she marries a Kashmiri or outsider.
I got the question. I think in my earlier narration, I had made specific reference to Sushila judgment.
Yes.
See, popular perception was that a Kashmiri woman married to non-permanent resident was not entitled to a share in the family immovable property. Sushila judgment of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court has taken a view that no, she is entitled to, but this is not the complete picture. Such lady is entitled to inherit the share in the immovable property of the family, but after her demise, if that family is not the permanent resident of Jammu and Kashmir as prescribed under the earlier law, then the legal heirs, her husband or children, are not entitled to succeed to that. So in that sense, it still remains, even after Sushila judgment, a theoretical right.
I hope that satisfies the questionnaire. Sir, the next question is, that's again a very interesting question. When and why Article 35A was introduced? This question is asked by Vidula Ambekar. When and why Article 35A was introduced?
See, 35A was that also, there is partly a reference made already by me. Article 35A was introduced in the presidential, along with as a part of presidential order of 1954. 35A was introduced because I have already narrated the background by which there was some kind of expectation from Maharaja Hari Singh and the population of Jammu and Kashmir that they will be able to retain their separate status as a sovereign state, which was not possible once that invasion took place and the instrument of accession had taken place. As a result of that, in the deliberations that took place during those period, pulls and pressures worked, and as a result of that, the leadership then, I don't want to go into the political aspects of it, the leadership then acceded to the demand for that special status under 35A. That's how in 1954 35A was brought in. But that was the provision which actually created the huge gulf between the people from rest of India and people from Jammu and Kashmir.
Now, another interesting question is asked by Advocate Farida. Now, sir, this question has been asked, this question has been argued on screen many times. Now, the question, sir, is that as far as Article 370 is concerned, similar benefits are granted to 11 other states.
You are right.
Especially.
Yes, I will name some of those states.
Yes.
See, Article 371, yes. A, B, C, etc. are those provisions which create special provisions for certain states. For example, most of us are from Maharashtra. For Maharashtra, we know that Vidarbha and Marathwada development boards, they are created under constitution because it was a need felt in a particular region that within that state of Maharashtra, two regions were not sufficiently developed, and there was some kind of overlooking by the rest of the state towards its development, and therefore a kind of constitutional provision, some kind of constitutional assurance was provided through that. Similar provisions are there with respect to most of the states in the northeast. For example, Sikkim.
Sikkim is there.
Sikkim has a different background. Sikkim was not part of the Indian state originally. There was some kind of midway arrangement from 1950-51 to 75. And in 75, Sikkim formally joined the Union of India. And therefore, those particular peculiar situations, there were certain provisions made in the constitution in those Article 371. But please remember,
Yes.
the 370 effects and post 1990 situation, that is something that had an alarming effect. Imagine a situation where everything was normal in Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan was not able to exercise any kind of influence in Jammu and Kashmir, and there was no gulf created because of the provisions like 35A, etc., etc. Perhaps 370 also could have been okay with the people of India.
Probably, sir, what Advocate Farida wants to ask is, of course, partly you have answered, but her question is, there are similarly placed about 11 states.
Yes.
Then why this government's decision about Kashmir only and not with the other states?
That I think I already made a reference. The situation which worsened from 1990 onwards. And we all know that we say that Kashmir is paradise and it's a paradise of India. But today the Indian people can't go and travel safely. That's the situation. And
That's true.
After all, what is assured to the people of India is unity and integrity of India. So if at the cost of that 370 is creating some obstacles, I think the Parliament of India will be well within its powers to neutralize that.
Thank you. I think Vishwajit's mic has started working. So Vishwajit,
Yes.
can you go ahead?
Can you hear me, sir?
Please.
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me now?
Sir,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you once again for answering these questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vishwajit, please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Sir, there is a question put forth. There are many central government statutes where it clearly says that it is not applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes.
Now, after the neutralization of the Article 370, will there be a need of formal amendment so that all these statutes are made applicable to the state of Jammu and Kashmir?
See, in my speech earlier, there is one thing I missed out. I must thank you for that. There is one more step which is taken by the government, by the Parliament at that time. I talked to you about 370 additional clause provided. I talked to you about the presidential order under 373. I talked to you about the abolition of statehood. There is one more act which is passed by the Parliament, that is Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization of States Act. And to that act, there is a schedule. There are schedules annexed by which what are the acts which existed in Jammu and Kashmir are no more operative. What are the acts which were operative in rest of India are made applicable now. There are 4 schedules, which 4 schedules give all those details. So now the situation is more or less same.
Sir, the next question is, there are certain privileges extended to other states in India under the Constitution.
Yes.
Now, how does these privileges differ from the one which was extended to the state of Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, under Article 370?
I think that
How are they
question,
different?
I think that question was already raised by earlier questionnaire through Harshad. But I again repeat that 371 A, B, C, etc. They are the provisions with respect to state of Maharashtra, state of Gujarat, state of Andhra Pradesh, state of Nagaland, state of Arunachal Pradesh, many states, state of Sikkim. See, in federal structure, there is nothing unnatural for the Union Parliament to make provision in its constitution to address the peculiar situation, peculiar problems which exist in that particular part of the country. There is nothing unnatural about it. The problem comes in when that becomes the ground for breeding some kind of separatism, breeding some kind of gulf between that part of the country and rest of India, denying the fundamental rights to a segment of the society within that particular province, that particular state. Problems start there, and it is this situation which actually is a distinguishing factor between the steps taken between Jammu and Kashmir and other states where special provisions are made, which were addressed by the Parliament in August 2019.
Thank you, sir. So there is one more question that is asked. You refer to a judgment of Justice Nariman.
Yes.
Now, in that judgment, Justice Nariman had clearly said that Article 370 is not a temporary provision.
I'm sorry.
Now, as this,
See, I'm sorry. In fact, my colleague, I must thank two of the persons who are assisting me today, which I should have done in the beginning. My colleague, Advocate Gwen, is sitting with me, and she has helped me a lot of in great way by adducing the material in preparation of my speech, and who is technically supporting me in case of any glitches. I'm incompetent. I'm not well equipped to face those situations. And you must have seen what happened a few minutes before. See, Nariman's judgment, this is a popular misconception deliberately being advocated by some sections. Nariman's judgment doesn't say that Article 370 is now permanent. What is advocated in the media is Nariman has held that Article 370 is now permanent. I'm sorry. Paragraph 14 and 16 of the judgment in SCC report, if they are read, you can see he says that Article 370 can be amended only by presidential order on the recommendation of the Constituent Assembly. He just reiterates what Article 373 provides for. There is no comment, no observation independent of that by Justice Nariman. But four important findings recorded by Justice Nariman, which I have already narrated, are completely overlooked by such section who deliberately just misquote Justice Nariman in that judgment. According to me, Justice Nariman does not say that Article 370 is permanent provision.
oh, so there is one more question. As you said, neutralization of Article 370.
Yes.
The question put forth by our member is the neutralization of Article 370 infringement or contrary to Article 36 of the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir?
See, I will tell you, therefore, again, those observations by Justice Nariman in 2017 judgment. One of the observations I talked about was Indian Constitution is supreme and the Constitution of Jammu and Kashmir is just subordinate to it. I think this answers this question.
All right, sir. So there is one question. There is one more question. When you say neutralized,
Yes.
do you mean the government indirectly amended the Constitution and deleted Article 370?
See, I will tell you, a power to amend the Constitution is provided under Article 368. But there are certain provisions in the Constitution which allow the Parliament to amend the Constitution without actually resort to Article 368. One example is Article 370, presidential power under Article 371, 2 and 3. All those provisions confer power upon the president, not upon the parliament by amending under 368. It's independent power under 370. Similarly, Articles 2 and 3 of the Indian Constitution, which speak about the creation of states, union territory, etc., and changing the borders, changing the area, changing the name of the states. For example, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, division of states, Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh, division of states. This all took place under Articles 2 and 3 of the Constitution. Article 4 itself provides that the changes to be effected under Article 2 and 3 are through legislative means without amending the Constitution. So not that every provision of the Constitution needs to be amended by power under 368. I have already given 3 examples where without 368 amendment can be effected. 370 categorically provides for that.
All right. Thank you so much. I will now hand over to Mr. D'Souza for concluding this webinar.
Harshad sir, are you saying something? We can't hear you. Harshad sir?
Yes, I am sorry. There is one last question from Mr. Deepak Dhole. The
Yes.
question to you, sir, is simple. That all these acts which we normally use have in their start mentioned that it will be applicable to the India except Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes.
Now, what will be the effect?
Now,
in view of
that also in one of the questions which came from Vishwajit, I think that partly
Has
stands
been
answered.
partly, yes.
That new Reorganization Act of 2019 applicable to Jammu and Kashmir is passed by the Parliament. That act has scheduled various schedules, and those schedules give which are the acts originally existed in Jammu and Kashmir which are no more applicable, which of Jammu and Kashmir acts are now continue to be applicable, which are the acts of the Union of India which will not apply, which acts will apply. So all those schedules give those details.
Sir, thank you very much. It was great hearing you and listening you on this topic. Sir, we have with us Mr. Nilesh Borate, President of Pune Bar Association,
Oh,
Pune RERA Bar Association
hi.
as well.
Hello, sir.
So Nilesh would also like to join me in saying you thank you very much once again. Nilesh.
I also on my part thank you you individually, Harshad, to Advocate Borate, to Anil, to Vishwajit, everybody, and to all your team who are in actually organization of such webinars. I must also thank and congratulate your associations, 3 respective associations, for organizing such academic activity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nilesh, you
So it
can.
was really insightful lecture. While planning this lecture, it was very important important and imperative to have a person with much of knowledge on this particular topic, Article 370. We, on behalf of Bar Association of Maharera, Maharit, and also on RERA Practitioners Association Pune, we are really thankful to you to being among us this evening and sharing your expert opinion. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Anil, please.
Yes, it is often said about Kashmir that if there is a heaven on earth, it is this, it is this, it is this. And if you go back, it starts from Mughal Emperor Jahangir, and then of course many other people quoted that. So of such a wonderful place, such a renowned and a well-known speaker, so profound and so deep, and such a wonderful control you had, sir, on the topic. You spoke not only from the historical background, but also the inbuilt mechanisms that the Britishers had built when they passed the Indian Independence Act and all other acts pertaining before that. And also, most importantly, you gave us a background on the Privy Purses, each princely state. You took the trouble of going through that. You gave us such detailed information on the various judgments that were passed. So I felt that sir could actually go on for another hour and we would be listening with rapt attention, and which is quite evident in the questions that came up, because the questions were also so deep and so rich and so meaningful. So on behalf of all of us here, we thank you so very much for sharing your valuable time, your insight, your wisdom, and your knowledge on such a I would say challenging topic. You took it, you did it so well. I also thank all the members of the Bar Association and also our colleagues from Pune for joining us, and especially all the participants. When we started off, we were close to around 150 participants. So thank you very much for logging in and for giving us such deep and interesting questions, challenging questions, which Advocate Vishwajit Mukherjee moderated so well. And I also want to thank our Man Fridays, this is Chetan and Abhijit Balan, who gave us the tech support. And of course, all humility, we have a biggest thanks reserved for Harshad sir, who takes the trouble of sewing all these beads together and forms a wonderful chain of this legal fraternity. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.